Let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful for the time that we have, for the people that have gathered faithfully each day to study. We ask for a blessing. We know, Lord, that we hunger and thirst for light because we hunger and thirst for righteousness. And we know, Lord, that there is more light and truth than we could ever understand. But we know that we have to walk in the advancing light that is in front of us and be aware of the light that has passed because it guides our feet. And the light of the midnight cry, Lord, is shining all along the path, and we just ask that we can walk in it. May your Holy Spirit be here to teach us. May you guide in this study and help us to understand. Thank you for hearing this prayer, we pray, and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So good morning, everyone. I appreciate everyone coming to the study and for the participation, for the emails that I get, the comments also on YouTube, which are very helpful. If you put a comment on YouTube, I'll try to comment on it if I need to, if it's a question, but it does help draw attention to maybe things I misstated or things that aren't clear in people's understanding. So those are useful for people watching the YouTube videos. And also emails to me as well help me and guide me in the things that I need to present. So I'm first gonna just do a very quick review of some structures. So most of you, of course, are very familiar with this. This is Ezekiel's 391.5 years. And I've done this study extensively, and I just put it up here. I didn't want to draw it all out. But we know in 1 Kings 13, verse 1 to 5, there's this prophecy of Josiah, and that prophecy is fulfilled 350 years later in 2 Kings 23, 15 to 18. And it's fulfilled in 627. And this is the date from which, both of these dates are from which Ezekiel 4, verse 4 to 6 is counted, the 390 years and the 40 years that Ezekiel lays on his left side for 390 years and his right side for 40 years. And we can see that 627 date, and then we see this Passover of Josiah, and that's in 622. And that's the 30 years mentioned in Ezekiel 1, verse 1. So in Ezekiel 1, verse 1, he says it's in the 30th year, in the 5th year of Jehoiachin's captivity. So the 5th year of Jehoiachin's captivity, which began in 597, is when Ezekiel begins to write. But it's also in the 30th year. And the 30th year is, of course, symbolic of a priest, and Ezekiel is a priest. And it could be even that he's 30 years old. That is possible. But I've demonstrated other places that that 30 years is 30 years of a Jubilee cycle. And that's based on what's in Ezekiel 40, verse 1. So if you're not familiar with this, I suggest you go back to the studies on Ezekiel that I've presented. Now, I do want to present Ezekiel in a study, and I've thought about next week. And I really think we should go through Ezekiel in a very detailed manner. And in order to do so, Ezekiel is extremely broad. It ties together all of this message. And so I've thought about it, and I want your thoughts on it. But my plan is next week to begin a series on Ezekiel, but it wouldn't be just a 5-part series. It would be a continuing series on Ezekiel, moving right from chapter 1 and moving all the way through to the end of Ezekiel at whatever pace, I guess at a child's pace, maybe is the best way to look at it. So it would be a series that goes on for quite a while. And it would cover a great variety of topics. So it wouldn't be just trying to understand what Ezekiel's saying. like a commentary would, we would actually be looking at all of the different elements in Ezekiel and how they relate to this message. So that's an idea. And if you think it's a good idea, tell me so. If you think that's maybe a little bit ambitious to take a continuing series like that on Ezekiel, then tell me that as well. But that's what I'm impressed to do, whether that's right or not, whether my impression is the best thing to do. But that's the way that I think that we should approach Ezekiel, whether it's going to start next week, which I think I would, unless something else becomes pressing. But even then, in an Ezekiel study, a continuing Ezekiel study, we would be able to cover lots of different topics. It would just be that Ezekiel becomes the springboard each study for whatever it is that's in that study. So in Ezekiel, one of the things about this 391.5 is that Ezekiel deals with the prophecy of 390 years. And he's predicting the siege of Jerusalem, which begins on January 5th, 587 BC. But it's a year and a half before the destruction of Jerusalem. And even though he's outwardly predicting the start of the siege, that's the only thing that he addresses in a specific way as far as the prediction is concerned. He's actually predicting the exact time of the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 and in 70 AD. And we know this from his vision of Ezekiel 20, where it's on the 10th day of the 5th month, and also his 390 days, where he ends on the 10th day of the 5th month. And then there's this destruction of Jerusalem. So I'm just going to illustrate part of this here on the board so that you can see what I'm talking about. So we know we have this from 977 to 586. And this is the 10th day of the 5th month, right? So this is the 391.5. And so he's using a 391.5 to make a prediction regarding the destruction of Jerusalem here in 586. And he had these waymarks along the way, the 10th day of the 5th month, when he finished lying on his left side. And his prophesying began on the 5th day of the 4th month, which is midnight. And this is the 390 days. And then the next day, on August 15th, he's going to begin his 40 days. And his 40 days, is here. So this is not, this is kind of zoomed in onto this. But this 390 days and this 40 days speaks to this whole period of time. And the 390 days ends, so I'm just going to get rid of this here. So he has the symbol of the midnight and the midnight cry. But he's also going to have the 10th day of the 5th month in Ezekiel 20. So 20 verse 1. And this 10th day of the 5th month becomes this repeating meme that points to the 10th day of the 5th month here in 586, but also in 70 AD, the date of the destruction of the temple in both of these years. And then we extended this to 2020, the 10th day of the 5th month in the year 2020. And that was how we first came to July 18th, 2020. So this was July 18th, Julian, right? So this is an important point, and I know that most of you understand this if you've been studying this, but there are some people who won't, and this is going to address our history as well. Now we know we also had the 391.5 from the prophecy of Ezekiel. So in Ezekiel, we had 1299 and 1449. And it's from 1449 that you get this 391 years, and you're going to have 15 days. Now, this 391 years is going to end on July 27th, and it's going to be the 26th day of the fourth month. And that's the symbol from Josiah Litch's prophecy, the 26th day of the fourth month, that is used all throughout here as this meme. And that pointed to July 18th, 2020, but it did it on the Gregorian calendar. So this one you have the 10th day of the fifth month, this one you have the 26th day of the fourth month, which was July 18th Gregorian. And so these two dates, one from Ezekiel and one from Revelation 9, were the basis of our prediction. That is, we were using these prophecies of the past that predicted future events, and we could see that they tied together in our history. And they tied together in a way structurally that was impossible to have occurred by chance. So some people think, well, we were just, looking at odds and mathematics and stuff like that to understand this, but we actually had a really solid basis for this. Now, we're going to get into the chiasms in our history. So that's where we're leading, because this is about chiasms. And when we look at this July 18th, 2020 prediction, not only did it tie into, so we got basically three main lines. We have Ezekiel, and of course we have Litch. But we also have Snow's letters that were a witness, right? And we've just studied Snow's letters. And all of this is a point to understand our history. Now, what ended up happening, so I'm kind of going through this quickly because I have a lot to cover. But what ended up happening was we had come to the conclusion that we could set dates, that we could mark events in the future, that we had time attached to our message. And the argument for it was that we already had time in our message. We just didn't call it time setting because they were past events. But based upon the structures of things that were happening, there was the suggestion that we could predict events in the future. And in doing that, there was an argument made that was a dispensational argument, that we're just in a different dispensation. I never accepted that argument, the dispensational argument for time setting. And in November of 2018, I wrote a paper, which I didn't end up publishing, but I did end up sharing on Facebook, the chapter dealing with time setting. Can we set time? And my argument was that we weren't time setting, because Ellen White has all this clear counsel about time setting, and that counsel still applies to us. So what we were doing was making a prediction about events that she never ever talked about. That is, she talks about time setting in connection with the second coming. And so I made an argument that we could set time, but in a very limited sense, and that what we were setting a date for was internal. It was about this movement. And also that we had come to understand there was some events regarding Islam, and we saw that Ellen White said nothing about these events, and that it was possible that maybe we could predict an event that was external, connected with our internal line. And that was the attack of July 18th on the United States by Islam. Now, of course, that never occurred. But if you look at my arguments regarding that, it seems to me that everything that I said in the past regarding time setting was correct. And I knew that in order for us to predict external events, we would have to have a lot of evidence. And it seemed that the evidence kept piling up. And so as we approached that date, it seemed pretty certain that all of our structures were telling us that that date was correct. But on July 17th, and it wasn't the first time, but on July 17th, I still cautioned about the structure and the dates that were in there in our structure that pointed to the possibility that our prediction would fail. And even though I believed in the structure, and I still do, we weren't willing or able to see, even though we had all this evidence, that our prediction was going to fail. We weren't able or willing to see that until afterwards. So even though we knew there was this caution and we knew that there was always an if attached to July 18th, you know, if we can predict external events, then this is what these lines are saying. So if that was true, then we would have been correct. But I wasn't convinced 100% that that was true. But I was convinced 100% that the lines were correct and that everything pointed to an attack on July 18th on Nashville and the Parthenon. And we're still trying to sort through why that disappointment occurred. But one of the things that we can see is that the time was correct, and it pointed to internal events. Those external events are still future, but we can't predict the exact time of them, but they're still tied to that. So how they're tied is not something I completely understand, why we have a date or a time with an event attached to it, but that event is attached to it. The attack on Nashville is attached to July 18th, but it just is not happening on July 18th. So July 18th is predicting an event. We made a prediction about an event because of July 18th, but it just doesn't occur then. So the time that we had, we could look at it two different ways. We could express it in two different ways. We could say we had the correct event but the wrong time. And the Millerites could have said that. We have the correct event. Jesus is coming back, but he's not coming back on October 22nd, 1844. So we could say it in that way. But the Millerites took the position in the way that they stated it is. We had the correct time, but the wrong event. So in a sense, both are correct because the event is that they were looking at in 1844 was the second coming, but it was also the cleansing of the sanctuary, which they believed were the same event. And so we know in our history that we were predicting this connection to end time events, and we just didn't fully understand it. And so that's what I'm going to try to illustrate here the best that I can for your evaluation. So when I made this prediction, July 18, 2020, and I presented it at the School of the Prophets, and I believe it was an evening meeting that I presented this. It was, I think, a Friday night, if I remember correctly. And it was the end of October, the beginning of November. So I should have probably looked that up exactly which meeting it was. But I was presenting what I had found in Ezekiel, dealing with the 390 days, the literal days, and showing this 10th day of the 5th month, this repeating mean that ends up marking July 18th, 2020. And I based this, the year 2020, on the fact that we already had a November 9th prediction. And so I looked to the next year, and I saw in Ezekiel 20 that symbolism in both 20 verse 1, which talks about the 10th day of the 5th month, so it's chapter 20, but also the verse 2020, I've given you my Sabbaths as a sign that you may know that I am the Lord your God. So that Ezekiel 2020 also pointed to 2020. So we looked at 2020, the 10th day of the 5th month, and we found it was July 18th, Julian. And what this tied us to was Samuel Snow's letters. So the way that I had done it is that we had this prediction. And we're going to look at this a bit more in detail. But we all know that there was this November 9th date, 2019. And here, I'll do it this way. I'll put this over here. I'll put November 9th, 2019 over here. And there was this prediction made regarding October 13th. And this prediction regarding October 13th, 2018, was made on July 27th in 2018. This was Daniel from Brazil who predicted that there was 126 days from June 10th is the date he chose, June 10th, and he's counting ordinally, so that he's counting June 10th as the end of the Italian camp meeting in 2018. This is a Sunday, and he's going to count 126 days to October 13th, which is a Sabbath. So obviously, this is divisible by 7, and so so obviously he could have counted from June 9th. Now, on June 9th, we had a prayer. They closed the Sabbath at 9:11 p.m. So it's actually beginning June 10th, if you wanted to look at it from a biblical perspective. So this is around sunset. Here, it's not exactly sunset in this year. It was in the previous year in Italy. But he made this prediction, and he noted this, and I have a copy of his screenshot from his phone. But he noted this, that he's making this prediction on July 27th. He's not really focused upon what July 27th is. He just wanted to keep a record of when he was making this prediction so that when it occurred, he could tell people. But it happened to be July 27th. Now, on October 3rd, Tess presented November 9th, 2019. And not in an explicit way. She hinted at it, using all of these dates and these lines of different spans of time. But mostly it was focused upon, and the part that impressed me was the Russian, French, and German revolutions being connected with this date of November 9th, or of 11/9 in the case of the French Revolution, with the 9th of Thermidor, which was, and I just don't have time to go into this, but in the French Revolution you have the 9th of Thermidor, and Thermidor is the 11th month. So you would have 11th month, 9th day. And that date on the French revolutionary calendar was July 27th on the Gregorian calendar. So July 27th was tied up here in this prediction. And it was also tied up with November 9th itself. Now, of course, July 27th comes from Josiah Litch's prophecy, July 27th, 1299. And it's July 27th that lines up either Julian or Gregorian with the 26th day of the 4th month in Josiah Litch's prophecy. So this July 27th here suggested Josiah Litch's prophecy. But even before I got there, I was on October 13th, Daniel was the one presenting the sermon at Lambert Church. Now, he had expected that either Parminder or Tess Lambert would be giving this presentation. And he had talked about the span of 126 days. Now, this reminded me of as I looked at this, I counted the number of days as 391.5 because I'm counting from noon. And we normally, when you use a calendar converter, when it gets to a day, it would often get just to midnight commencing that day. So from noon October 13th to November 9th was 391.5 days. And so I'd already understood this as the number of the years of the kings of Judah from 977 to 586 when Zedekiah is killed. So this was already something in my mind, this 391.5. And in 2016, when I had done presentations on Ezekiel, we had connected Ezekiel's 391.5 to Josiah Litch's prophecy, because he uses the prophecy of Josiah in predicting the siege and the destruction of Jerusalem. And Josiah Litch, of course, his name is Josiah, and he has a prophecy of 391 years and 15 days, 15 days being 0.5 of a month. So this 391.5 harkens back to Ezekiel and Litch. And it was Ezekiel and Litch's prophecies that we used in predicting July 18th. Now, of course, I want to go into the structures of the chiasms. So, but we need to recognize what actually happened in this history. So I did this calculation, and I knew that he had this 126 days. But I knew if this is the 391 and a half years of the kings of Judah, then that prior to that, there would be 120 days or 120 years of David, or Saul, David, and Solomon, to who each reigned 40 years. So there's 120 years of United Kingdom of Israel prior to this 391 years of the kingdom of Judah. And so I said, well, maybe we should look back here to June 15th. So June 15th was where I counted this 120 days from. And probably could just jam it in over here. So we're going to just put here. So there's 6 days between mine. So we're going to go June 15th. Here, maybe I'll do it this way. I'll leave that June 9th up there, and I'll just put June 15th. So there's just two different ways in which we counted, but I count this as June 9th, when you have that 9:11 p.m. prayer, and then June 15th is this 120 days. Now this ends up being the fifth day of the, or pardon me, the second day of the fourth month on the rabbinic calendar. And at that time, that's what I had to look at. I didn't have a calendar converter, and I just quickly looked at this, and I found that this was the second day of the fourth month. And the second day of the fourth month is a symbol of July 18th, because in Millerite history, the fifth day of the fourth month is July 21st. So the second day of the fourth month is July 18th, Samuel Snow's last letter. So I had this symbolism of Snow's letters here and July 18th when I went back to June 15th on this structure. Now, so this 120 days, that was what I counted. And so I saw that there was some significance. This 391.5 was significant. Now, on October 14th, I presented this. And that week, I had more light regarding this. So, so I'll show you that in order. That sort of it was done. And so this here, I'll put this up on the screen. It's not going to be very large. And because I have to zoom out. So some of you may be able to see this depending on what device you're looking on. What I have here is these are at the top. There's some information regarding the School of the Prophets post that had been up regarding 9/11 in 2017. So on June 2nd, 2017, there was this camp meeting. So on below here, it says the sermon on the glory of 9/11 to us as priests and the judgment of the living commenced, and the judgment of living. Now, the sermon commenced at 7:11 p.m. and Jeff closed 2 hours later at 9:11 p.m. on June 2nd in Torre Police, Italy, something like that, however you say that name. And that was exactly at sunset. So he closed at sunset on June 2nd, 2017. And that date was also, that day was Pentecost. And of course, Pentecost we saw in Samuel Snow's letters, the third day, sixth day of the third month. Now there's 120 minutes in there. Now Pentecost, of course, one of the symbols of Pentecost is the 120 who were there, who had the Holy Spirit poured out on them. And there was dispute regarding the 120 minutes. So obviously Jeff did not speak for 120 minutes. But if he started at 7:11 p.m. to speak, which makes sense based on the timing of these presentations, and he finished at 9:11, there was a bunch of technical difficulties that arose that delayed their presentation from when it started. So some people have argued against this because there's no evidence for it. The evidence was destroyed. But originally, this was what was said on June 3rd. So in this one on the left above there, it says, Jeff's sermon was on the significance of the glory of 9/11 to us as priests and the judgment of the living, which started from 9/11. It went for exactly 120 minutes, prophetic symbol for 9/11 to midnight. And when it concluded, Jeff knelt down to pray. The time was, believe it or not, exactly 9:11 p.m., which was exactly when the sacred hours of the Sabbath started. And then they have this proof of when the Sabbath begins at 9:11 p.m. on June 2nd in 2017 there in where they were located in Italy. So I would take this current, a contemporary testimony the next day it's presented as pretty strong evidence that it was actually 120 minutes, even though some of the people in the new movement rejected that argument. And at the time, I didn't understand why that was happening, but partly was they were trying to undermine the 391.5 days. So there was a group of people who were trying to dispute that, but the contemporary testimony at the time was that it was 120 minutes from when he began. So, and then you can see this, there's 391.5 days from Pentecost to June 15th, 2018 on the Julian calendar. So in my line, I have June 15th on the Gregorian calendar up here. So this is June 15th on the Gregorian calendar. But if you count 391.5 days from that June 2nd, it will bring you to June 15th on the Julian calendar. So June 15th as a symbol is connecting these two structures. And then we're going to have this 126 days and also this 120 days. So, I'm not going to go into detail on this part of the structure, but that brought me to noon, October 13th, and then that 391.5. So this was the main line of 391.5. And then, of course, we counted 252 days to July 18th, 2020. So this was this other part of this structure. Now, so I'm trying to present these chiasms, but as you can see, these are tying to lots of other prophecies and studies. Now, the main thing, though, that came about as I did this, so I'm going to erase this a little bit and do this part over, is that we had this structure. So I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to put November 9th, 2019. And we had this October 13th, 2018 at noon. And then we had this structure. So this structure was simply, we had June 9th, 2018. We had June 15th, which I had marked, which was the second day of the fourth month. And it's a symbol of July 18th, or Samuel Snow's last letter. And then we had July 27th. I usually actually put it below here, but maybe I'll put it up here. July 27th. And July 27th is this prediction regarding the 126 days. And so this is what we had. We have this 391.5, and we had this 126 days and 120 days. And then we noticed later that this 126 days could be divided by August 11th. So after I'd actually figured out some of this structure here, I'd figured out July 18th, I saw that this could be divided as to 63 and 63. Now, I could also then put August 11th here, Julian, because there's 13 days here between this date and this date. And in our history, there's 13 days between August 11th, Gregorian, and August 11th, Julian. And so when I was presenting July 18th, Julian, I had lined it up with November 9th, and I had counted back here 391.5 days. And the date that I came to was June 22nd. Now, I knew that this was Samuel Snow's last letter, his fourth letter, and this is his third letter when it was written. And this is Pentecost. So again, we have that symbol of Pentecost. Now, we're not dealing with 2020 here per se. We're just dealing with July 18th as a date, right? So it could be any year. I'm not really marking a year. I'm just marking a span of time between July 18th and June 22nd. And then, well, I thought, since we have June 22nd, and if we put Samuel Snow's letters up here, this would be February 16th. And then 6 days later, you would have February 22nd when his letter is published. And then if you look at the span of time here between June 15th and July 27th, you would have that same span of time between April 3rd and February 22nd. So June 27th, this span of time here is 41 days, 42 days. June 15th, so it'd be 30, so it'd be 42 days. This is 22nd, and there's 29. So yeah, so it ends up being 41 days, I believe. Anyway, it ends up being basically parallel. So when I say basically, it's not exactly. And then we have April 19th. And so April 19th lines up with August 11th. And then from April 19th to May 2nd, his second letter, is 13 days. So what we saw is there was this structure here that was very similar, not exactly to the day, but very, very close. And so we saw that this paralleled Samuel Snow's letters. Now, somebody could argue about this and say, well, it should have been exactly to the day, but it's not. So, you know, there could just be this argument about it, that somehow it's close, but it's not, and close doesn't count. But it was close enough that we had this testimony in all this different symbolism. July 18th, June 22nd, definitely between the Pentecost and this being connected by 391.5 days, and all these different symbols and structures, we could then say that there's this match between the prediction of November 9th and this here, Samuel Snow's letters. And Samuel Snow's letters are the prediction before midnight. So the way that I would look at this back then, when I first find this, is I knew that I had Samuel Snow's letters as a prediction before midnight. And now we were making this prediction before midnight, and we're marking November 9th as midnight, and so we're predicting midnight. So this to me seemed very profound. Now, again, people could argue with this that it's not quite exact, that there's this day movement of some of these lines, but I would just say that it's so close, and all of the symbolism in here is there, that it's really hard to ignore. You can't just say it doesn't mean anything, because we saw this Samuel Snow's letters. Now we're about this prediction before midnight. Now this part of it here, so we have Samuel Snow's letters and we have this, but I'm going to have to redo this again. So what Elder Jeff did is he saw some structures or some dates that were significant, and this happened over time, that we sort of saw this unfolding. So now I'm going to draw this again. So in our history, again, we have this June 9th, and we have October 13th. And you know, if we want to create this structure, we put August 11th here, which gives us 63 and 63. And then we know we also have, and I'm going to put these dates just down here, the 6 days to June 15th. And, you know, we have this July 27th date. These aren't Julian dates just because I put them down here. And so we have these dates here, but this is our main structure, right? So these 3 dates, and this is 126 days. And what ended up happening, we have this November 9th date over here. And we had a split in this movement. And this happened in August 29th, 2019, that the new movement basically made it clear that they weren't a part of this movement anymore. They believed that they were the movement and that anybody who didn't join them was part of the Alpha movement and would not be saved, that we would close our probation. And then we had this period of time to November 9th to do that. But what ended up happening is on September 7th, 2019, Jeff awoke from his sleep and he said that this new movement was in apostasy. Now, I was here October 13th at Lambert Church at noon, but I was here in Warburg Church in Alberta at noon, watching Jeff's presentation while I was in church on my iPhone, and noting that he was doing this presentation, calling out the new movement. And I noticed the span of time between here and here was 329 days. Now, that's one of the things I noticed. I also noticed that this was 63 days. And that September 7th is 9/7, and 9 times 7 equals 63. So I noticed some things here. I also noticed it was the biblical day of the 6th day of the 6th month. And 6 times 6 is 36, which is an inversion of this. So there was this thing. So this is 9 weeks. This is 9 weeks. This is 9 weeks. This is 18 weeks. 126 days. Now, in doing this, I also looked at the center here. So even before we had the rest of this chiasm, I just looked at this period of time and noted that it was March 27th, 2018. So that's, or 2019, pardon me, 2019. So I noted that, but I didn't know what it meant. But I noted that on September 7th. I saw this structure and the number of weeks here, which I think was 47 weeks. So I was looking at all of this, this structure, counting out the number of weeks, counting out the number of days, noting this center date here. And even at that time, March 27th didn't mean as much to me as it later did. I didn't see this as the symbol of the Levite 723 when I first noticed it, but I did shortly after, within the day. But when I first noted that, I just noted this, and then I started thinking about it. What is March 27th? And it's the 27th day of the 3rd month. So it's a symbol of 273, the symbol of the Levites. And just before September 27th, I had noted some connections between numbers. And if I remember correctly, sometimes it's hard to remember all these things, but I'm just gonna quickly look here. So I had noted some connections between these numbers. So I know I'm running out of time. I probably shouldn't even do this, but I have to. number is. Yeah, so I was right. So I had noticed that if I took the number 187, and this is what we call base 10. So our numbering system is base 10, it's grouped in bases of 10. But this number would be equal to 273 in base 8. So if you don't know what bases are, you can look them up. But I had noted this, and I'd also noted that if I took 391 in base 10, it equaled 187 in base 16, a hexadecimal. And then I also noted that if I took, I can't remember which one it was. There's another number I took, I can't remember it at the moment. But anyway, these two here, 8 and 16, this spoke to the number 8 that Jeff was speaking about, the 8 days for the priests and the 8 days for the Levites. So there's 8 days and there's 16 days. And so this to me was tying the message that I was giving regarding July 18th and Tess's message regarding 273, the number for the Levites, and this 391. They were all tied together in these numbers that testified that this message was tied together. It was the message of the North and the South. So this was the midnight cry message for the priest that was being given. And so the 273, the 187, and the number 8, which Jeff was giving, so Tess, me, and Jeff were all presenting these messages that appeared on the surface to be different, but they were all connected through these structures of numbers, but also through these spans of time. So I'd already understood 273 was significant. So it didn't take me very long, but when I first just wrote it in there, I wasn't thinking 273. It took me, I can't remember how many hours to figure that out, but I started thinking about it, and this was brought to my attention a few days before. So obviously I then converted it into a number. So I don't know how long that was, but it wasn't like me noting this first. I noted it without understanding what it meant. Now, so we have these 329 days. Now, what ended up happening is that, I'm kind of skipping a lot of things, but we had January 11th, 2020. Now, Jeff had noted this without understanding the structure. So he had noted this, but he didn't think about this whole structure or anything. He just had believed that January 11th, it was a sermon, I think, done by Daniel Fontenot that was presented, and Jeff then knew what, he said he understood Daniel 11. So however that is, I'm not sure what he meant and why he chose this date, but it was the date he chose, and he had noted it. And later on, he came to see this structure. So this structure of what happened here and here became this midnight chiasm. So this is the midnight chiasm. And there was a profoundness in this about this November 9th. So this is after November 9th that we're seeing the significance of November 9th in the context of what happened here on September 7th and January 11th. But he also counted, it was 441 days, which was 36 weeks. And so here we have this 36 symbolized here, 6 times 6, and 36 is an inversion of 63. And this ended up going to March 27th, 2021. So one of the things that it shows in this chiasm, we're pointing to March 27th, but March 27th, 2019 is the center of this chiasm. And this period of time from March 27th, 2019 to March 27th, 2021 is a period of 731 days, which is a symbol of July 31st, which is July 18th on the Julian calendar. And in this period of time, you have a center, of course, which is March 27th, 2020. And it was from March 27th, 2020 that the church on March 27th, 2020 began 100 days of prayer and fasting, or prayer, I guess, probably not fasting. They're not going to fast for 100 days, but prayer. Some people would fast in parts of this time. But this 100 days of prayer that was going to end on July 4th, which ended on July 4th. And we could see that that this was part of this overall structure of events. So, we could put over here, July 4th, maybe I'll just put it a bit more over here. And that 100 days of prayer is 144,000 minutes.
The January date.
It's what?
2020. The January date is 63 weeks to March 27, 2021. You have it 36.
Oh, it's 63 weeks?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for correcting me. I wasn't sure. Yeah, 63 weeks. There's something else about a 36 in this line that I can't remember what it is. But anyway, 63 weeks. Thank you for that. Yeah, because 36 weeks ends up being 252 days. 63 weeks is 441 days. Thanks. That's why we have Stephen here to correct my thinking. So we have this 100 days, and then we know that we had from July 4th to July 18th, because it's the end of July 4th, there's 13 days, which was 18,720 minutes. So we have these symbols of minutes, which testifies to our message. And so we had all this light that was pointing to here. Now, what I've done, though, is I've presented 2 chiasms and a bunch of other information. But the main thing here is we have this midnight chiasm. And this chiasm here with these March 27ths is what we call the Levitical chiasm. So this Levitical chiasm is the chiasm of the Levites. And one of the things we see, it's about the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So March 27th is going to mark this 100 days of prayer. And then what we expected on July 18th was going to be the empowerment of this message. And that would give us this impetus to give this message to the Levites. And that didn't happen in the way that we expected. I still believe that an impetus has been given to the message. We just don't see it yet. And more light is going to come that is going to help us. But some people are just critical because, like in October 22nd, 1844, there's this disappointment. And you can argue, some people have argued, well, the next day, Hiram Edson has this vision. But nobody's accepting Hiram Edson's vision. He has this vision, and he's not even recounting it. He's not even telling people about it until much later. So it's not like Hiram Edson is, go the next day and it's published in the papers that Hiram Edson has this vision. And even if it had been, people didn't really accept it. So we know that it's not like the next day they have the answer, that everybody has the answer. I believe we have the answer to our disappointment, but it's just not clear to everybody yet. So we expected this impetus, but we know we have this March 27, and I put 2020, but it's 2021 here. And that's a future date on our line. And we still have some future dates on our line. So, I'm going to obviously have to, this is something that I'm going to have to erase, and then we're going to have to expand it. But this midnight chiasm was very, very powerful as far as tying together a bunch of different truths and a bunch of different insights that had happened from different places and at different times. So it tied together what had happened in 2018 with what was happening in 2019 and 2020. So that was very profound. That is, we could see that there was this continuous line in this structure that God had given us, and that it had marked this March 27th date, and it had tied us to March 27th, 2020, and to March 27, 2021, which we had on our bigger line. So again, I have to erase this all. And,
The 126 and the 63 ties us to January 11. Is that the only witnesses?
What's that?
The 126 and the 63 that ties us to January 11.
Right. And there's more about that. I'm leaving.
That's 111, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm leaving out all that mathematical calculations that we did to affirm that. Now, we also had something else. So we're good. We're going to put on our line here, December 25th, 2021, and November 9th, 2019, and July 18th, 2020, and March 27th, 2021. So Stephen had given us this 777 days. And Stephen had predicted November 9th, 2019, based upon November 9th, 1989 being 39 years. And he also saw the 777 days in 1989. So I'm just going to put it here. You put 1989, not 1898, 1989, November 9th, and December 25th, 1991. This was a period of 777 days. In an ordinal count, this is a cardinal count. And this is the period of the fall of the Soviet Union, from the taking down of the Berlin Wall to the end of the Soviet Union. And so he had tied this together. Now there was a bunch of other studies, and and I wish I could just present everything all at once so you could see it all. But Stephen had used a study that he used to predict November 9th, based upon October 22nd and 144 days from October 22nd, 1844 to November 9th, 1849. And that was also connected to my studies. What, Stephen?
You said 144 days. It was
1844 days, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I said 144. 1844 days from October 22nd, 1844 to November 9th. And so he had presented this to Jeff in the summer of 2018, before we knew about Tess's November 9th date. So there was all this evidence, or these different studies that were all interconnected. And in some ways, Tess's study was less connected to what Stephen and I were doing. And she never did accept any of these other dates. So she predicted November 9th. She didn't accept October 13th, even though, her hero, AOC, is born on October 13th, 1989, and Tess is born on November 9th, 1990, and they're 391 and a half days apart in their birth. She still never accepted the 391 and a half. Maybe she didn't do that math. But the point is, Tess was using November 9th. And if you watch my presentations at the camp meeting, I endorse that. And I talk about her structure as being solid. But I knew that there was problems with what she was saying. And so the only reason why I endorsed November 9th was because of the 391.5. And when I was talking about the structure being solid, I wasn't just talking about her structure. I was talking about our whole structure of what had happened. But if you had just taken Tess's argument, her cherry picking of events and dates, you could actually do that with almost any year and other dates. You could do the same type of thing. And because I've studied how evangelicals do prophecy, time prophecies, and she was really doing much the same thing that they do. It's actually not part of this whole interconnected structure. And you can't just take some date and find out all these dates and then find spans of time and then try to relate them. and say that they're significant because they need to be connected by prophecy, not just because we can take numbers and dates. And so when we came up with July 18th and when we confirmed November 9th, it was based upon solid established prophecy and symbols that couldn't really be argued against. It wasn't manufactured in reverse engineered to try to create something. And even if we had tried to, with the complexity of it, it would be impossible, even with modern computers, to make up something like that. So her November 9th on its own was not very powerful. But if you look at the testimony of what Stephen was doing in coming to November 9th, and then the structures that came from the fulfillment of events in our history, then you could see that this was extremely sound. Now, we're gonna, so this we call, the 777 days. There's tons and tons of witnesses to this. One of the most powerful was when I was in Arkansas on November 9th, just for a few days. Stephen had presented, I think just before that Lamech's name, that if you took the gematria, the numbers, and you gave, this is 12, 1, 13, 5, 3, and 8, and I think that's correct, and you multiply them together, so you just put a multiply instead of a plus sign in there, you get 18723, 20, days or numbers, whatever they are. But this could symbolize a date. No, I'm going too fast here because I'm running out of time. And so this was a really powerful testimony to me that you could take Lamech's name and do this, that you could create this date. But as far as I knew, this was the only singular instance of this. Now, to get back to this, I will get back to it, but we had 2 other dates that Jeff had presented. So as I was going through and writing papers, one of the papers I wrote was on June 22nd. That's not the date I wrote it, that's the topic that it was. And that's because Jeff had presented June 22nd, 2011, as when he had received $165,000 to start the School of the Prophets. And then he had marked that in June 22nd, 2014, that they had their first camp meeting in Arkansas. This was at Lambert Church, and I wasn't there. I was at one there in the fall, in October. But this is what he marks here, June 22nd, 2014. Now, we have actually 2 specific dates that are important in 2014, June 22nd and October 22nd. But as far as Jeff marking these, he thought this was significant. Now, I had also been studying when I studied July 18th, and so I'm going over something that I've presented many times, but that we had this date, December 21st, 2012. Now, December 21st, 2012 happens to be exactly halfway between June 22nd, 2011 and June 22nd, 2014. I didn't find that out until, a month and a half ago. But June 21st, 2012 was important to me. And I saw it as, it's part of the Mayan calendar, but I had figured out the Mayan calendar back in November of 2018, that it was connected with August 11th, because the Mayan calendar begins August 11th, 3114 BC, or we could do it as 3113. That's a Gregorian date, August 11th, 3113 BC. Now, it's actually on the Julian calendar, it'd be September 7th, and it would be 3114 BC. So I shouldn't put BC here. That would just be minus 3113. So Gregorian calendars, when they go BC, they have a 0 year, but it was actually September 7th on the Julian. So this is Gregorian and this is Julian. But the book I was reading mistakenly thought this was a Julian date. Now, these dates, when I looked them up, when I looked up this as a Julian date, it yielded based on the way the calendar was done. That is, I'm looking at each month, not counting like we do with the modern, with the biblical calendar from the Exodus. But it was the 26th day of the 4th month. But if I looked it up, the correct date, it was the 10th day of the 5th month. So I had these symbols that I'd used for July 18th and August 11th in the beginning of the Gregorian calendar, or Gregorian, Mayan calendar. So if I go back here, and I'll just put the Julian date, September 7th, 3114 BC. I'll make it easier for somebody using a calendar converter. To December 25th, it's 1,872,000 days. And this is the start of what we call the 13th Actun. So the way that they write that is it's just 13,0,0,0,0. This represents 20, 18, 20, 20. And each one of these is 144,000. So that means this is actually just 13 times 144,000 days gives you this many days, 1,872,000. So there was all this profound understanding regarding December 21st. Now, we have a few chiasms that we presented. We presented the midnight chiasm. And the midnight chiasm, the basic thing that it showed us, if anything, is it showed us the connection to March 27th. And then we have the Levitical chiasm. And it's also connected to March 27th because that's the center date and the two end dates. This one is the center date of that is March 27th. And then we have this other chiasm here, this June 22nd chiasm and so it has this here. But we also have another significant June 22nd, which you're going to see in a minute. And this is going to be 2017. And then we're going to have another June 22nd, which we're going to put over here in 2020, June 22nd, 2020. And these are periods of 3 years that we have here to the day. Now, this June 22nd, this is the day that this movement became internationally known. So, and that was because of the newspaper article. So that June 22nd is marked all the way through here. Now this one is the center of this chiasm. And so what I had done here is I had noticed this 777 days, and I'm going to do it this way. There's also 777 days before November 9th. It starts on September 23rd, 2017. And this is Lambert Church, me presenting July 18th as the PBM. So I'm presenting July 18th, not as a date 2020, but just as Samuel Snow's letters, the prediction before midnight. So you can start to see how all these things are interlocked, these wheels within wheels. Now this is also the Revelation 12 sign prophecy, which the evangelicals had predicted that a period of 1,260 days for the tribulation would begin with the secret rapture happening here. It didn't happen. So this is a failed prediction. And we know this is a failed prediction of the end of the world. And so we have all these dates, this 777 and this 777. But we can also mark those here. That is, I can take 777 days and I can come to February 6th, 2015. And this would be my 52nd birthday. Now, of course, this isn't about me, except that, you know, I'm the one making this prediction and doing this calculation. And so this becomes significant. But the 52nd birthday, the cycle of 52 years as a cycle in the Mayan calendar. But if I take the year of 360 times 52, I get 187220 days, right? So 52 prophetic years would be this number that we get with Lamech. Now, the reality is, if you look over here in this line, we have done this, 252, 252, whoops, and 273, right? So we're all familiar with that. Now, so if I was going to actually count from my birthday, February 6th, so I'm going to get rid of this here. I'm going to put my birthday in here, February 6th, 1963. And I was going to count this many days, I wouldn't end up obviously to February 6th, 2015, because this is based on a year of 365.24 days, 241. So it would obviously fall short. But where it falls short is it comes to May 9th, 2014, 273 days before February 6th, 2015. So we have that same structure. Here we just have 504 days. And so this is this 18720 days. But when I go here, it's 18993 days. And so that it ends up on giving you this structure. Now, the significance of May 9th, I put 19th, but May 9th is it's also April 26th, which is the 26th day of the fourth month, which is a symbol of 26th day of the fourth month on our calendar, but it's a symbol of Islam and Josiah Litch's prophecy. Now, I can also then count another 777 days. So I got this 777, and I got another 777, and this brings me to March 24th, 2017. Now, March 24th, 2017 is on the biblical calendar the 25th day of the 12th month. And the significance of this is that this one ends on our calendar the 25th day of the 12th month. So this ties these structures together in this way. The most important part, though, is the center of this whole chiasm. So if you could ignore all of this in the middle if you wanted to, and just go from December 21st, which is created by this June 22nd chiasm. And you would count from December 21st to December 25th, 2021, and you would get this period of time, which is 3291 days. And if you remember in that midnight chiasm, that center part from October 13th to September 7th was 329 days. This is just 10 times as many plus one. And the center of this one, of course, was March 27th. When we look at the center of this whole chiasm, we actually have a dividing line where the end of June 22nd and the beginning of June 23rd is the center. So June 22nd becomes the center of this whole chiasm, the 777 chiasm. And it ties together with this structure here of the June 22nd chiasm. But this June 27th chiasm, or June 22nd chiasm, whatever we want to call this, the 777 chiasm, is tying together all of these other chiasms in our history. So it's a lot of information. Now the question is, from a practical point of view, what does this mean? And that's the part that is sort of in dispute. So let's kind of go back and think about this. We know God has been leading this movement from the beginning, and we couldn't make this stuff up, right? So this is not something that you know, people accuse me of bringing myself into it by putting my birthday there. But the thing is, the structure that is created is already there, but it's just an affirmation that that structure is sound. And it ties together all of what we know and understand. That is, we can place the midnight chiasm in here. We can place the Levitical chiasm. We have this June 22nd chiasm, which I call the priestly chiasm. It's about this movement. And that priestly chiasm about this movement is tying a whole history together from 2011 to 2020, that we have to acknowledge that is about this movement, specifically FFA, and the message that it's giving, and starting in 2011. So there's some importance there that we have to look back with this School of the Prophets in 2011. And I think we're going to understand more about these things as time goes on. So we know God has been leading this movement. You know, we've been a part of it, and we see this. And now we ended up making this prediction. And this prediction had all of these witnesses. Now, not everyone understood them all. That is, people may have seen them presented and said, well, that looks very, very convincing. And I'm convinced. And then they would look at some of the math that was done. Some of it, you know, they didn't understand. Well, you know, but everybody seems to be accepting what's happening. And they would look at all these different evidences. We'd read Ellen White's vision about what was going to happen in Nashville. We saw the different witnesses of why from Acts 27, why we chose Nashville as the location, even before we had really looked at Ellen White's vision regarding Nashville, why we chose the Parthenon. So we had all of this evidence pointing to something, to an event, but that event didn't transpire. So it's natural we're going to look at this again, and we're going to say, were we misled? What did we miss? That's natural. And so we have to go through that process. We have to examine, were we deceiving ourselves? Were we being deceived by somebody? Was God really leading this movement in what we were doing? Had we gone off course? Now, what I've tried to do, if anybody has watched the other videos right from the beginning, so right from July 18th, you know, I first evaluated this disappointment and looked at this chiasm, the 777 chiasm, and showed that I presented out on July 17th, and I could see that it shows a failed prediction. But yet nobody responded when I had sent that email out, other than to say, you know, it's actually evidence for the prediction. And I tried to look at that right after July 18th again and try to evaluate. And it seemed to me that we had the right time, because we obviously have all this structure telling us that we're going to have this failed prediction. And so obviously that structure is correct. It's just our understanding of it was wrong. And then I looked at measuring the time. And in measuring the time, we used, of course, a non-biblical book, an apocryphal book, but something that it lays out that is a biblical principle. And the basic principle is you can measure the time, you can look at prophecy, you can try to anticipate what's going to happen. But until the event passes, you will not know what it is. But also, when it does pass, you will know that this is the time, that you will understand that the time is correct. So if you want to know whether a time prophecy or time structure is correct, you have to measure the time. You have to do what we did. We've been measuring time in our movement for a long time. We've been marking waymarks and seeing their structure. But when it comes to events in the future, we can measure them, but we can't know what the event is going to be. You know, we can try to anticipate that, but we're not going to be correct. And then the next aspect that I tried to look at was Acts 27 itself. And what we learned from Acts 27 is that we're going to arrive at this certain island and everyone will be saved. But we know that ship has to break up. And this, to me, from my perspective, illustrates this movement and what has happened since July 18th. Everybody gets to the island on boards and pieces of the boat. So that organizational structure that we had been building up, that we've been depending upon, has in a sense fallen apart. But God has done it for a reason. He wants us to take up the work, because the problem is that we've been looking for FFA to do the work. We've been waiting for this organization to occur so that this work could get done. But God has shown that we have this individual responsibility to do that work. But we will get to the island. The work will be accomplished, even without the ship. The ship is going to pour out all of its precious wheat, all of its light, all of its truth, and give a message. So the loud cry will occur. But we know that it's not going to occur with an intact ship. Even if you look at the broad picture within Adventism, we know that the loud cry happens after the Sunday law. And the Adventist church is definitely not going to be in existence when that loud cry is given. God takes the work into his own hands. And I believe he's done that with this movement, the priests. So I took a week off to really evaluate things after this study on Acts 27. And one of the problems, and I'm just trying to be really honest and clear here, one of the problems is I just say, well, who am I to be doing what I'm doing? And I took that week and I looked at the Alpha chat on WhatsApp. And, I could definitely see that there was a lot of confusion and a lot of anger at that time about things that have happened in the movement. And so I felt that I really needed to address this other issue, which was the disappointments themselves. And that's what we looked at last week. And these disappointments of the Millerites, I think we have found some extremely profound parallels in Millerite history that we had not recognized. Now, what I've done so far in looking at these chiasms, at these structures, especially when we look at it in Millerite history, and now when we look at it in our history, and really trying to tie this together. So I'm going to try to tie together all this. I know this was tons and tons of information. And so if you're not familiar with it, it could be quite a burden to look at it all. But when it comes to Millerite history, the real issue, that's a crooked line. The real issue has to do with how we look at our parallels between Millerite history and our history. Here we're going to have SDAs over here. And, in this history, you're supposed to have Christ's return, right? The Millerite history was leading up to the beginning of the judgment. And in our history, we're going to have the end of the judgment, and we're going to have Christ returning. And when we talk about this, of course, and trying to put what is the dividing line, we obviously put April 19th, 1844, this beginning of the tarrying time to October 22nd, 1844. Now, in this history, of course, we also have August 11th, 1840. And when we line up our history with this, we haven't really defined, within this movement, we haven't really defined who this movement is or how it's represented. We know we're priests, but in comparing this with Millerite history, we have this problem. And this problem is we have Seventh-day Adventists, right? So this is actually a continuation of this history, but another repeat of the time of the end. And then we have 9/11, and then we have 9/11. And in our history, 9/11 represents both of these events. Now in this history, we have snow. So we'll just do snow like this, not really marking exactly where he starts and where he ends. But we have snow here in this history. Now, if we're going to look at this, the line of the priests, we often ignore the big line, right? Because we're concerned about the Sunday law. And so what we do is we match the Sunday law up with October 22nd, 1844. And when we do that, we then put the Levites in here. So we're having this testing. This is SDAs over here. But now we're going to have a group that's being tested over here. Now, in SDAs being here, you know, we could also put SDAs here. So I don't want to be confused about this, but these are a different group of SDAs. And this is just the Adventist church in general, but this is a group of SDAs that we call the priests and Levites. Because the SDAs is the whole movement of Seventh-day Adventists. But these are the people that are going to receive this message, these two different groups. These are people that are studying. So obviously we come out of Seventh-day Adventists. But this is the way we look at it. Is we have this close of probation, because this is a close of probation. This is a close of probation for Seventh-day Adventists. And then we try to match these lines, this priest, the Levites, and the Nethinim, in this history. Now, of course, we're going to have the rest of the line, you know, the loud cry. So really, the close of probation, you know, the general close of probation is over here. But for Seventh-day Adventists, it's here. And so we've looked at this history. This is where we are. We're leading up to the Sunday law. I know I'm going a little bit over time. But the question is, where do you put the priests? And what I would argue is that the priests are snow, and that we're starting after 9/11. But if you're comparing us with Millerite history, we're starting after this 9/11, August 11th, 1840. This is snow, right? This is snow. This is the priests. And we believed that we were the line of the priests was going to go up to the Sunday law. And then the line of the priests would end and the Levites would carry. And we had them staggered in their start, and each of the waymarks would become the next waymark of the next group. But the point that I'm making is I believe that the line of the priests ends prior to the Sunday law. And that we have these waymarks, which we call midnight and the midnight cry, which are Raphia and Penium. And these we were predicting to happen on November 9th and July 18th. But we're in the line of the priests, and November 9th and July 18th have passed, and Raphia and Penium have not materialized in what we understand them as external events, as part of this history that happened in 1989 that we see in Daniel 11. And that still has to be true. The evidence for Raphia and Penium preceding the Sunday law is very strong. And so then when we look at our history and what occurred, we were mistaken in how we lined up the line of the priests with the line of the Levites. Because this is about the Levites, but if the Levites are the Millerites and we're snow, this lines up our history exactly. And then that history of the Millerites, of the midnight and the midnight cry, this is the message that we're going to give in the time of the Levites, in the line of the Levites. But we've had this message developing. So this is not just snow, this is snow's letters. This is a development of truth. And snow's letters end on July 18th. And so midnight, it's the prediction before midnight. This is what this movement is about, this prediction before midnight. And this prediction before midnight is a development of truth about the Sunday law that's coming and about these events. And none of it has changed. So when it comes to the message that we have to give, our message has not changed. All that has changed is us. So we have changed. We've changed in our evaluation of ourselves. And also the amount of light has changed, that God has poured out an amazing amount of light. And we have to sort through that light still. We know that some of the light that came was mixed with error. So, error comes in because Satan is trying to destroy that light that's coming. So we know that the error is mixed with light, and so we have to separate the precious from the vile. But we have a way to do that. And the way that we do that is we look at the message that we've been given, and we have to accept that it is true. And when we accept the message is true, then we know. Here's what we know. Ellen White says that all new light is an unfolding of the old light. That when you have new light, it never dispenses with the old. The old is always seen to be shining brighter when you have new light. New light that isn't new light, when people profess to have new light, it always undoes some established truth. We know that every piece of light that we receive has to build upon all the light that has happened in the past, and it has to make it shine brighter. And that's one of the things that I saw with a lot of the supposed new light, is it rejected light that happened. So if we reject something like November 9th and July 18th, and we say that we were wrong, to set those dates, we've rejected light. And because, as I've tried to show, that if we reject that parallel that we have with Millerite history, we have to reject Millerite history, because Millerite history, we just played it out. We just went through it. And so if we're going to deny our experience, now we would have to deny the experience of the Millerites after 1844, who accepted the sanctuary. And really, that's connected to what happened to the disciples. Now, if we're going to put the line of Christ here, so that was one of the controversial lines here, and we're going to talk about, who these people are, we can say the priests are the disciples. So that's not a problem. And I could look at Christ's line and say, we are the disciples. And we've understood that for a long time. And the separation of the true and the false priests is a separation of Judas from among the disciples. But we know that the disciples are connected with Christ, and that this movement has been connected with Christ. And the Millerite, we can talk about the dirt brush man, however we want to look at it. But this is really a message about Christ's character being perfectly reproduced in his people, or developing in his people. And this group of people that has gone through this trying time and is continuing to go through it is developing a character that's needed if you're going to have a message that's given. And you think about yourself, you know that you cannot possibly do it. We look at ourselves, I look at myself, and I'm overwhelmed by the task that is before me. I look at my failures of the past. I look at my human weaknesses. I look at my lack of understanding, and I say, this can't be done. But I know it can be done because Christ says it's going to be done. And he has to fit us for this work, but also he has to take the organization of the work into his own hands. A human organization, no matter how well-meaning, is always going to have tares among the wheat. Ellen White is very clear on this. The only way that you can get rid of the tares is that if each individual who is connected with Christ does the work that God gives him to do, you then don't have any tares in that movement, because only the ones connected with Christ are the church triumphant. The ones who aren't connected with Christ are not connected with the work that we're doing. It's when we see that the Seventh-day Adventist Church formed, or when you look at any time a church is formed, it's formed in a sense, there's a part of organization that's always there, that's important. But when a church forms after a failure, it forms because the work isn't because of the failure. It's not wrong. The organization that happened in 1863 was not wrong. But it was the result of the failure of the church to do its work. And if we fail to do our work, then we will be subject to have to be an organization again. So an organization is not saying order. You need gospel order, but I'm just talking about an organization, a structure where all the funds go to one place and all these decisions are made, and you have boards and committees. And every time I've seen this, and I've been involved in lots of organizations, sat on a lot of boards, even boards outside of Adventism, and I can tell you that you don't accomplish anything. It's a type of it just the work slows down to a snail's pace. But what we see happening now, and what we've seen happen in this movement, and because of Jeff's leadership, is this vast amount of light being poured out upon this movement. If Jeff had been like the new movement is, where you're controlling everything, and you have to have, anytime something's shared, it has to go through a committee that decides whether it's truth or not. You're going to have people on that committee who are not Christians, who are Satan's operatives, and they're going to make sure that light is hindered. And the way that they do it is often not attacking the light at all. They attack the character of the person who presented that information. They use rumors and innuendo, and they just stop things from happening so that light doesn't get to anyone. And Jeff, thanks to God's working in his life, has allowed light to shine upon this movement. And any organization that's going to stop that light from shining is going to be a failure. So those are my thoughts. Any thoughts on these things? I know this is, it was a pretty pretty involved. It was way bigger of a topic than I could have done in 5 presentations. But I think we get the idea of what we're talking about. And there's just a few comments, about the 390 and the 40 is like 430 years of Abraham. So we know that the 390 and the 40 don't chronologically add up to 430 years, because they overlap. But the 390 and the 40 days do, because he can't lie on his left side and his right side at the same time. So there is a symbolism there with the 430. And we know that Paul does not die from the snake bite, is what Chuck says. Now, again, we know that Satan is come in, and we're on the island of Malta. And Satan comes and he tries to destroy this message. But we know that he's not successful. And so that's one thing that we can be thankful about. So any more thoughts on these things? And if you can give email.
I just watched a historical documentary on Malta during World War II. It was a outpost of the British government that ran a secret submarine base, and it had anti-aircraft guns all over the island. Mm-hmm. And they had underground tunnels for the maintenance of these submarines, and they had ships that brought in the fuel, water, and torpedoes for the submarines. The powers of Italy and Germany never took Malta during that process, even though Mussolini wanted to annex the whole thing. It never happened. Just a historical thing.
Okay. Thanks for that. Somebody just signed in and wondered about your view on the number 66 or 666 on a line chronologically. So I have dealt with the 666. That is 666 years from Jehoiachin's captivity to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. So 666 is important, and so is 66. But I don't know I could answer that right now. So if they can email me and ask more specifically what they want me to refer to.
Peter,
Yes, Peter.
I have a question as well. I wanted to know if we look in the line of the line of Millerites, né?
The line of which?
The Millerites line, the
Yeah.
Millerites history, and the line below the SDI one, the line below the 1989 line. The line of the priest, if we are looking at 9/11, is it? I was just asking because it seems like in the line of the Millerites history, when the Protestants are being bypassed in 1844, we see Snow and the Millerites, they are in the same line, moving together. But in the line of the priest, isn't there supposed to be another line below 9/11 where we will have the priest having from 9/11, we have a midnight cry, and a Sunday law that pertains to the priest, which does not go with the line, because it seems like our line and the line of the Levites are going together, and then we now having the same waymarks in the same line.
Okay.
I don't know.
So I think I understand what you're asking.
Yeah.
So when we put this midnight and the midnight cry here, what we're doing is we're paralleling the Millerites as this referring to the Sunday law. This is what Jeff has always taught. October 22nd parallels the Sunday law. I shouldn't say he always taught, but he's taught it for a long, long time. That this is the close of probation for Seventh-day Adventists. But we know that Millerite history is actually typifying a whole bigger line, that the close of probation is not here at the Sunday law. It is for those who are Seventh-day Adventists, but the close of probation is here. This really is October 22nd, 1844, on that big line. So when we say, Millerite history, the midnight cry is going to be fulfilled to the very letter, Ellen White says, we know that this is the Sunday law, and this is the midnight cry, or the loud cry, we'll call it. And this is really midnight. The Sunday law is really midnight. If you're going to go back into Millerite history, you'd actually have to put the Sunday law on July 21st and the loud cry on August 15th. That's how you would line it up on the big line. And so in the line of the priests, we can do that. We can take this history and we can zoom it into the line of the priests. We have midnight. For the priests, midnight was 2014, right? So if we're going to put it here, it's 2014. We can do it in that way if we want to. We could say that's the Sunday law. And then we can say the midnight cry was 2018, October 13th. And then we're going to say, well, we had the midnight cry for the priests, and then we had July 18th, 2020. Well, that's, or we have 1919, pardon me here, 2019. 2019 is the close of probation. So that's the close of probation on the big line if we were going to expand it. And then we have the second coming, and the second coming was 2020, right? So we could have then 2020 here. And in the line of the priests, we have actually are passing through this whole history of the big line in the line of the priests. And now we're in 2020. We're in the time of the second coming, if we really want to look at it in that way. But that's the problem, is that we were overlapping this line of the priests with the line of the Levites. And so we were making 2019 to be midnight in the Levites and the midnight cry to be 2020. And that, in my view, is wrong, because if we look at this as the prediction before midnight, because that's who the priests are. If the priests are really Snow, sure, we're going to be here at Raphi and Panium giving a message. But the thing is, this development of truth of the prediction before midnight is the line of the priests itself. Snow's line of the letters, of Snow's letters, ends here. And so if the priests are anything, at least we know that we're Samuel Snow's letters and that we're also Ezekiel's message. But this Raphi and Panium are still future events. But these are future events before the Sunday law. And these are events, midnight and the midnight cry. But the Sunday law and the loud cry are what really were paralleled here in midnight and the midnight cry in Millerite history. Because Ellen White doesn't deal with this history at all. She doesn't tell us anything about what we just went through. in any direct way. Because when she deals with her line goes like this. The close of probation, that happened here, the shut door on October 22nd, 1844, is the arrival of the third angel's message. And that message is going to continue until it's joined by the second angel. And when it's joined by the second angel, which has already begun in our history, it's going to swell to a loud cry. And then after that loud cry, there'll be the close of probation. And before this loud cry is what we call the Sunday law. So all of this history in Ellen White, she's not dealing with any of our history. We might say that she's dealing with 9/11. So, you know, we could say that 9/11 she's addressing, and that's the arrival of the second angel. So we have the second angel arriving here, but she's not dealing with all this stuff between 9/11 and the Sunday law in the way that we have just experienced, right? Because she just looks at 9/11, right? This is going to be this arrival of the other angel. There's going to be the Sunday law. There's going to be this loud cry, the close of probation, and all those events. So this is the problem, is we're in this history here. We're the children of 9/11. And so we've experienced this history, and we thought that this history was going to overlap with this history, and it doesn't overlap in the way that we expected. That's the main point, I think, that I'm trying to make and that I see. And it's up to other people to try to decide whether this is true or not. But I think we could agree that everything we expect to happen, that we predicted that would happen at Raphia, didn't occur on November 9th, and that everything we expected to happen in regarding to Paneum did not occur on July 18th. And so we would have to agree that if Raphia and Paneum are truth, that they're still future, and that they're outside of the line of what we just experienced. And either we say our line is fallacious, that it didn't occur, that it was some kind of deception, or we accept our line as the prediction before midnight, as Samuel Snow's letters. And that to me is the most logical, based upon everything that happened in Samuel Snow's letters and all the symbolism and all these structures and all these chiasms in Samuel Snow's letters and in Millerite history, because we have these two chiasms in Snow's letters themselves, and one of that chiasm lines up with the chiasm, the first part of the midnight chiasm in our history. And then we also have the other chiasm in Millerite history that ties with the book of Ezra, with midnight, July 21st. And we have to expect that that is still future. So we have, in this movement, we've kept looking for midnight to occur, right? And our understanding of that has developed as we've moved towards midnight. And, you know, we recognize that midnight on the line of the priest had occurred in 2014 on one level. On another level, it's actually sunset. But and then when we go to the Levitical line, so we were looking for midnight on the Levitical line, and we thought that that would be November 9th. Well, we know that that was not midnight on the Levitical line. So the midnight that we've been looking for, the one on the line of the Levites, is still future, because that's Raphia. And we've established that Raphia is midnight. And we thought November 9th would be that date. But November 9th happens to be in our line and not in the line of the Levites. It typifies what's going to happen in the future. So you could argue that November 9th and July 18th are typifications of Raphia and Paneum, but they're typifications because of what happened on an internal level within our movement. So they were only internal, not external events, but they are typifying those external events. And that's one of the things we need to study. So just to close up, so if you have comments or questions, feel free to write me. You know, I try not to ignore things. Sometimes I forget about an email that's sent. I look at it and then forget to open it again. So if I haven't answered a question that you have, or if you need some papers or whatever, email me again. My plans are to study Ezekiel over the next few weeks. And that will be a detailed study of Ezekiel, going through bit by bit. And it will be, Ezekiel will be the basis, but we're going to study a lot of other things as we look at things. So we're not going to move, we're going to move at a child's pace. That's the plan. And it's pretty, it's a pretty big project. But I just think that that's one thing we can do. And, you know, I know not everybody's going to be able to be there at all the studies. I don't expect to have, you might even be some studies nobody shows up. That's always possible. So, but they will still be on YouTube. And we're going to have a study tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. So the Friday night study will still occur. And then on Sabbath, and I sent out an email, it's going to be the same Three Angels Message Fellowship with the program that they have on Sabbath. So I'll be presenting the sermon on Sabbath. Not sure what I'm going to talk about yet. I'm probably going to talk about some of the stuff I just did here, the suggestions that I have for how we look at our lines. And then, of course, on Sunday morning, we will start this new study on Ezekiel. So I really am going to need help with it, though. That is, I'm going to need people to actually do some study on their own and share. And I probably am going to have some people share certain parts. So as we go through and people are watching and participating in this study on Ezekiel, my plan is that I'm going to give different people, or they'll volunteer when I appoint them, to study out certain things and present them. So I'm going to be asking people to do presentations in the study on Ezekiel, because it's a lot of information. So we're going to try to do it like a class. We're going to try to do it with some assignments, and do it together so that I'm not talking all the time. Okay, so thanks everybody for the time that we had. I know I went quite a bit over time, and I apologize for that, but it was a lot to cover. So any final comments, that something that I need to address at the present time?
On the 777 chiasm, we went back and we grabbed Lamech, and we had a number.
Yeah.
And we grabbed Methuselah, and we had a translation. There are genealogies that show up in the prophetic chapters, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and so forth, that we have not dealt with at all. And those genealogies, I think there's a number hiding there, and there's a translation hiding there.
Well, I'm sure there's tons and tons of stuff that's hiding. And that's part of the problem, is there's just so much light that, you know, one person can't uncover them. I don't have enough hours in a day to study everything. So we're going to need one another, and we're going to need God's Spirit to guide in the particular parts that each of us study. But I really am appealing to people to pray to God for what God wants you to study, and to present. Once you've studied something out and you feel you're ready to present it, dealing with Ezekiel or anything, let me know. And let me know what it is you want to present, and I'll figure out a time that you can present it. Whether, it might not be a whole study, it might be just part of a study. And but I think that we really need to study these things out together. So thanks for that, Chuck. And let's kneel for prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful once again for how you lead. Please bless each person who's been studying these things. Help us to understand them, to share them, and bring us together again, Lord, to study. We pray about the plans for the Ezekiel study, that your will, Lord, that it can be accomplished. But we also are open to anything that you have to say to us. Help us to understand all your truths and to live them out in our lives. Thank you for Jesus and everything that he's done for us upon the cross, and for the work that he's done in uncovering light for us, and give us strength to walk in that light. Thank you for hearing our prayer. Be with us throughout the rest of this day, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.